Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Franchise Your Success with our friend coach, Dan Olsen. How are you doing, Dan?
Well, it's a wonderful day today to be here with you, Marjorie. Thank you.
Awesome. And yes, we are super excited for the topic for today because we're going to talk about the Discovery Day. So take us through it. What is the Discovery Day for a franchise?
All right. So as you investigate a franchise, you're going through a lot of different steps to get to that point. And of course, the general steps are, first of all, looking at the franchise, having discussions with a person. This is not something that can be all done automatically digital. There's a lot of digital and things that we can do to qualify a person, but there's got to be a relationship, face to face usually, or at least Zoom meetings in these days where you have a chance to meet with people. Now, during the pandemic, a lot of those discovery days and meeting the people were done over Zoom. But it's best to be face to face, and that's what a discovery day is designed to do. But normally you're working your way up to that. So you've gone through the investigation, you understand about the franchise, you're feeling good about it. You've looked at some of the numbers, you've looked at the franchise disclosure document, gone through some of the legal documents, make sure you're okay, at least so far with those types of things. You've probably even talked to other franchisees, or you've talked with corporate members and got to know them over Zoom or on telephone calls, or however the franchise company chooses to do it. There's a little bit of variance. There's variance in every system. But as you get ready to that point, then at some point that franchise company will invite you as a franchise candidate to come to their discovery day and meet you. And the purpose of that is mainly twofold, is for them to meet you and make sure they feel comfortable with you, because they're going to be looking at you to see if you qualify to meet their standards as one of their franchisees. And for the most part, that's been figured out before you get there. So they wouldn't even invite you unless they felt comfortable and good about you. So if they invite you, that's kind of a privilege, unless they're struggling and maybe even a little bit desperate, which there can be some franchise companies like that. And hopefully you as a franchise candidate can feel that if they're desperate and they're overly bending over backwards and trying to do a lot of different things for you, that could mean a little bit of desperation because they need someone to come in and buy their franchise because they may be struggling a little bit. Mm-hmm. So you want to look at that signal as you detect desperation in that invitation. But for the most part, most franchise companies that I've dealt with are good with that. And they want you to come in because obviously they want to expand their franchise base. But they're usually sincere about wanting to see you as that person coming in and enjoying what they have to show. So the other part of the Franchise Discovery Day is for you to meet them and understand them and make sure you feel comfortable with them. Now, you've probably already gone through the numbers and it'll analyze that somewhat, so you know the numbers are working. Talk to some franchisees, you know that is very viable. So now it's a matter of diving in deep to see what this franchise is all about. And there's a lot of things that will show up at Discovery Day that you didn't think about because they're detailed. It gives you the chance to ask your detailed questions and have answers face to face. And then you can read the people. You can detect any of that, maybe desperation or any misleading things that might mislead you from what you were told before. But one of the things at Discovery Day is it's usually a good time to just be there, and they're very enjoyable. But also, I'll tell you this, at Discovery Day, usually, not in every case, but in most cases, you as the franchise candidate are expected to pick up your travel costs. Once in a while, they may throw out a hotel or something for you and buy that. But when you go there, if it's further away, then you'd pick up your rental car, and they'll tell you which hotels to get into nearby. But you'll also pick up your airfare and your hotel. And usually it's one night. Because usually you'll fly there, get there in the evening. They may choose to have you have dinner with them that evening, spend a lot of the day the next day with them, and then fly out later in the afternoon or evening to get back home. So most of the time it's usually just one overnight. So it's not a real heavy duty expense, but they expect you to to spend your own funds to do that, since they're spending their time and the effort building the franchise, and they're going to spend a lot of time and money preparing for you to come. Probably as much money as you spend on them, they will spend on you when you come into Discovery Day.
That's right. And I feel like it also proves them how much your commitment is, because you are truly making the
Correct.
effort to go all the way to them to actually learn more about the franchise.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like a dating experience at that point, because you're kind of like trying
That's
to get to
right.
know
That's right.
the new franchise that you're going to get into a business relationship with. So that's really cool. So tell me, are these meetings on the headquarters of the franchise then?
Yes, usually that's the best place to have a headquarter meeting, and sometimes it's nice to have a franchisee nearby that you can take them to. So when we brought in, I'll give you a good example of what this looked like. When we brought in to Arizona franchisees who were looking at our massage clinic franchise, I think you know my background on that. But I spent a lot of days over there with people coming in from all over the country. They would fly in the evening, and if we could, we would end up having that dinner the night before, and sometimes that wasn't always possible. But they would show up at the headquarters so they can take a tour, meet some of the people there. It's very important to have different people come in and do different presentations. They'd show up at 9 o'clock, for example. We'd finish maybe at 1. In the meantime, we'd have presentations on the software. What was unique about their software to help me manage my location? How are they going to recruit therapists to come in? That was an important question. How are we going to run our operation? What does the structure look like? What does the marketing look like? That's probably the most important thing. And we'd show them actual examples of marketing, and we go through the whole system step by step. But with different people in that corporate office presenting, that's another kind of a red flag that you can kind of look at. If there's only one person presenting, do they have other staff members? Do they have anybody else there to help support you? Right. If there's only one person, then you know that maybe there's not a lot of other people around there to help support you. You want to look for other people. But some of these corporate offices don't need a lot of people, because if you're doing a master franchise program, you're doing it more in the field. So for example, when I was with a hair care franchise, they had like 1,300 locations, and they only had 15 people at the corporate office, because the master franchisees were in the field. They were doing a lot of the support in the field. But still, you got to come to the corporate office and check it out and meet the people and make sure it's comfortable. So as they did that with our massage clinic, for example, they would come in, and then at 1 o'clock, they'd bring some lunch in, or they excuse them to go get their own lunch if they want to do that. And then at 2 o'clock, they would be over at the clinic, going through the clinic and seeing how that worked, and looking at the operation, and actually getting a massage so they could see how it worked. So they got some reward for being there. I see some of these other franchises, like clothing related or whatever. They would come in, they would look at the clothing and the lines and the programs, and they would go home with clothing they would send them home with. Or a medical franchise, for example, they come in the door, they get, maybe even after the initial Discover Day, then in the afternoon, they're getting a treatment, or they're getting some scans or tests or whatever it is, depending on that franchise. They're taking them through the process so they can feel it and get emotionally tied if that's really what they want to do. And they're going to know, as a candidate, you'll know if this is something for you, because you can feel what the other, in this case, the patients or the customers or clients are going through. You can actually feel that and how that works for you. And if it's working well for you, that's a good sign. And then, of course, the major thing that we look at is just meeting the people, making sure you feel comfortable in those people that you're dealing with.
That's right. And so we really want to make sure that we ace this meeting for sure. So what are some of the things that you would recommend us not to do while we are on that meeting?
So usually you're sitting there with several people, and you're sitting in their conference room. I've seen Discovery Days where it's one-on-one, and that's certainly fine too. So you have the whole team there. You might be just meeting one-on-one in their conference room with one person, and the next person comes in and does their presentation, meeting one-on-one. So sometimes you may be the only one there, and that's fine. But we try to set up franchise Discovery Days where we have 3 or 4 people. And that way you have others around you that are in the same situation trying to evaluate whether this is the right thing for them. So hopefully there's several people at that discovery day, which is almost always the case. There's more than that. And I think a record we had one time, we had so many people coming into discovery day that we had to go rent a hotel room, a portion of a ballroom. We had 58 people come in. And all at once. And so we had to do a big presentation. Now that's sometimes a little unfortunate because we couldn't do one-on-one with everybody as much as we'd like to with that scenario. But sometimes you may have 20 people in a room or 12 people in a room, and that's fine, but that shows you there's a lot of excitement about that particular franchise. But some of the things that you don't want to do, if you're sitting there with typically 3 or 4 people, and the franchisor and their team are trying to do their best to communicate to you and the people there what this is all about, they're usually always trying to do their best, and they have a program, an agenda they need to get through. Certainly, you're entitled to ask questions, and you want to ask those questions. And then there might be some hard questions there. But what you want to do is you don't want to be negative, because one of the things they're going to be grading you on is if you're a negative person. If you, for example, but plus, if you're negative about the franchise, chances are you won't get to discovery day anyway. So it's usually the positive people. But so you don't want to put down their baby. You don't want to call their baby ugly in front of everybody else. So you might want to pull them aside and say, I wasn't quite satisfied with that answer. Can you fill me in a little bit more about that? Rather than say, oh, that's not true. That can't be right. I mean, what you're telling me is not good. You don't want to be negative, because one of the top things they look for in a new franchise candidate, and you, to the fact that you can match up to this in Discovery Day, is even better. They're looking at someone that can deal well with people. So if there's a good interaction with you back and forth, that's a good sign to them. It's a good sign to you if they're interacting with you. They want someone that can follow a system. So this is where you're going to look at the Discovery Day, and you're going to see what their system is more all about. Can you follow that? And number 3, they're looking for someone with a good attitude, proper mindset that can help lift the franchise company with positivity versus the negativity that's brought into that room at that time. So I suggest that negativity is probably not the right time to do it. I'm sure you're going to have concerns, and you certainly should address them, but perhaps those should have already been addressed before you get there. Or if something pops up during Discovery Day, pull that person aside and just get a further clarification.
That's right. And then again, franchises are such a people business that you truly need to make sure that you are in a really good standing with the franchisor as well. So you
Yes.
told us that there's so many people that could also show up into a franchise Discovery Day. So how do we make sure to just be the one that is selected out of all of that huge group of people? How do we make it so the franchisors can truly notice us with a really positive way?
It's just that being there with a positive attitude is huge, and supporting what they're saying, and aligning yourselves with them. If you really feel that you want to be aligned with that, that's great. Now, sometimes we've had lots of situations where someone's coming in and they're vying, or they're looking to acquire a certain territory, and the person across the conference table from them is looking to acquire that same territory too.
Oh, no.
So it's can be a little bit of a touchy situation sometimes, but it is what it is. And what typically franchisors do is they will look at the person and their background. And so if it looks like someone comes to Discovery Day and they're looking for the same territory, then what they typically do will take the business plan, or the plan of development of the territory, or how they're going to develop the franchise. They will want to take that person aside and talk to them more specifically on how they would particularly develop that franchise. Usually the answer to choose which one gets the location, or even the master franchise territory, lies in that. But the other thing is, if you have a really friendly and upbeat atmosphere in the Discovery Day, and because one of the things that franchisor will want to do is, and you can kind of look around the room and see if they've prepared for it, and they'll usually put a bottle of water in front of you, and they may want to put a little tablet with their logo on it with a pen so you can take notes, or maybe a little gift or something. If they've taken the time to do that and address you, that you're special, that's a good sign from the franchisor as well. So when you get someone that's vying for the territory, what we've done is most cases we've tried to find the person who would be best for that territory and kind of work toward that end. And then the person who's maybe not quite as best, we can see if there's something a little bit further away and recommend other options. And that usually works out pretty well so that everybody's happy. Because the franchisor would want to get both of those candidates on board if they're viable. So they'll usually work toward that end to do that. Now, I'll tell you this little story. It's pretty interesting, actually, I think. So I had 2 franchise candidates vying for the same master franchise territory at one time. And so I started talking to them both and saying, hey, you know what? What if you partnered on it? So that way you don't lose out the opportunity. And because I see you could offer this talent and this other person over here could offer this talent. So if you came together, you could make even a more powerful franchise. And in a master franchise, I've done partnerships and they've worked out beautiful. And we've all benefited because there's enough money in there for everybody. So don't discount the opportunity to do a partnership with that person who's looking at the same territory you. So I've recommended that, and in many cases that's worked out really well. So anyway, this couple, these 2 different people, they came together, they bought the master franchise together as a partnership. They did very, very well. And a year later, the whole franchise company came up for sale. They bought the whole franchise company.
Oh, wow.
as that partnership. And they moved it forward, and it just was awesome for them.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. So now they're the owners of the
Now
whole
they're the
franchise.
owner of the whole company. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. So like I would say when you are in the discovery meeting, it's not only about like being in a good standing with the franchisor, but also with maybe your fellow franchisees, because you never know what talent you can also find in the same room sitting right next to you. And the thing that I love about franchises is how people oriented it is, because in reality, franchises, they are truly about that, like not only serving the people that you're
Right.
going to be having as customers, but also the people that you are going to be working with, your fellow franchisees, and
Mhm.
also your franchisor itself.
Exactly.
So any last tips that you could give us so we can stand out in this discovery meeting?
Yeah. How many of us have spent, a lot of money to travel across the country for an event, a 3-day weekend event or a 2-day weekend event? There's usually always a cost to that event. And you're paying, $500, $1,000, maybe it's even $5,000 or $10,000 for a weekend with somebody who's going to direct you through their program, and you're spending 3 days with them or 2 days with them or whatever. You're spending that money to go to those events. And we see that all the time. And pretty much every one of those events, what they will tell you, okay, you look around the room here, you've got all these wonderful people here who are thinking like you. You ought to be networking with them. You ought to be making friends with them. That's the same thing with the Discovery Day, but except you're not having to pay for the event. Sure, you're paying for your travel expense to get there, but if you got 4 other people in the room or 10 other people in the room, you ought to get to know them. You ought to exchange cards. You ought to think about what their situation is and make friends and network with them, because who knows, they may turn you on to something else they're looking at, but even more so, you have that camaraderie. And I've seen a lot of franchisees who've come to Discovery Day, and usually when you come to Discovery Day, I'll warn you about this. If you go to Discovery Day, probably about an 80% chance that you'll move forward. That's the rate. There's 8 out of 10 people that come to Discovery Day typically move forward with that franchise.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, but that's a good thing, because you're knowing you're getting into something. But what happens is if you got 10 people in a room and 8 of them move forward, this is kind of like your graduating class. You kind of align with them, and you call them, and hey, months down the road, hey, how's it going with this thing? Oh, I found this, and you share back and forth with them. So you build valuable relationships, not only with the franchisor and those team members, but with the people in the room. And it's amazing that the connections that can be made at a franchise Discovery Day. So anyway, we enjoy those people. And I've set a lot of Discovery Days where they have not moved forward, but they're still friends. And they go do whatever they're going to go do, and the franchise company continues to move forward. But it's all good. It's just maybe not right timing for them right now, but
That's right.
it's the friendships and relationships you build in Discovery Day with the franchisor and other franchise candidates that is extremely valuable.
That's amazing. I feel like Discovery Day sounds like such an amazing meeting and day. I mean, you get to discover the process for the franchise, you get to discover the franchisors, and you also get to discover really cool friendships along the way. So that's
Exactly.
amazing. Thank you so much again, Dan, for these amazing explanation about Discovery Day. Super excited for that now. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you everyone for watching us on this episode. And we are super excited to have you in our next episode. Bye bye.